Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like wanting to hear my take on marketing, but getting my POV on markers. Which, by the way, I favor chisel-tipped low-odor markers because 1, they glide with a velvety resistance, and 2, they deliver impeccably saturated lines. Of course, it all depends on what kind of whiteboard I'm writing on and if the glossiness is at a 60%.
Okay, Marcus, I think that's enough.
You wouldn't settle for just any marketing podcast, so don't settle for any insurance. Get the real deal. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. My eldest daughter, Georgia, is obsessed with Full House. Like, she's been watching it over and over and over. When I came into the house yesterday from work, I saw the television on pause, and now she's watching Family Matters. And I'm like, what in the world is going on here? I started thinking to myself, I was like, well, when I was growing up, what were the shows that I watched? And I don't know about for you, Gayle, but like I was watching Different Strokes, which was like around the 80s. So that was like my era. But I was also watching like Sanford and Son and Good Times. And like these were shows that like predate me. So I'm like living an experience that isn't my own. So I think about like Georgia's watching habits. And she watches things that are contemporary too, just like I did. Think about my watching habits when I was her age. And then I saw this stat from Vivo that said 65% of Gen Zs feel nostalgia for eras they never lived. And I go, okay, this is a thing. So I can't help but wonder why. Does any of this click with you, Gayle?
100%. I mean, because I think there were some old shows that used to get like played forever because they were cheap to air. Brady Bunch, Gilligan's Island, and it was because the have to pay the actors every time you run a thing, laws changed right after those shows from the 70s.
Oh.
So I grew up on the Brady Bunch, and then when my first PR jobs, I ended up traveling to 30 cities in America with Maureen McCormick, who played Marcia. And it was the weirdest thing seeing all of these different generations of old people and young people who were obsessed with Marcia Brady. It was so cool.
Marcia.
Completely hard to understand. But I think there's some human truths too. I think comedy holds up really well, right? Because like a family sitcom, like family drama is family drama. Being, 5 is being 5. Being 15 is being 15. I think there's some when content's based in human truths, I do think it can persist.
I mean, that's so true. I mean, I watched Leave It to Beaver. I watched the Andy Griffin Show. Like, this is why I Dream of Jeannie. Like, all those shows. Like, I watched all those shows. And I think you're right. There is a consistency to the human truth, even though the context changes. So, of course, that's just us and our experience, but we want to know what the market says. So thankfully, we've got 2 representatives of the market, 2 bright brains of the University of Michigan. So obviously, got Hannah and Aria with us. Welcome to Market Says. We are ready to be enlightened by you. Thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. Happy to be back. Thank you.
Let's talk nostalgia for a moment. It's interesting, the literature talks about nostalgia being a mental condition that, I think it's come from German roots that said that it was considered an illness, that you couldn't get past the past. But now we think of nostalgia as this like really warm and fuzzy thing. I feel nostalgic for a thing. So I guess my question to get us started, Aria and Hannah, is when you think about nostalgia, what era in life do you feel nostalgic for?
I can start with that one.
Yeah.
First of all, that's so cool. I didn't know that it like used to be referred to as that sickening feeling. And typically I do feel warm and fuzzy when I'm like looking back on stuff, but I just graduated. And so like now when I'm looking back at college, I'm getting that sickening feeling where I'm like, oh my God, I cannot believe that that's never going to happen again. So that feels super validating that there were doctors that like understood what I'm coming from. So definitely my college era right now, I already feel super nostalgic about that. And honestly, like, I think high school too. I wouldn't say that I feel like a sense of nostalgia for like my true youth. And I think it's because I don't really remember it. I think high school, like I have more of those formative memories that I can be nostalgic for.
What about you, Aria?
Definitely like Hannah, college has been at the forefront of my mind, which is so sad. I feel just washed up now and that, I'm I'm not able to
Yeah.
experience that. Yeah, exactly.
Welcome to the real world, baby.
But I mean, with the summer, I definitely every year feel nostalgic for my childhood. When I was 7 or 8 years old, going to my best friend's house, jumping on the trampoline outside, even the small moments of looking through the trampoline netting and seeing below the trampoline is a very specific memory for me. I think honestly, just romanticizing my childhood is very common for me, like being outside, being in those simpler times, and then, running inside and eating a bowl of mac and cheese that was made by somebody. It's great. And just thinking about that now, now that I'm in the city and not near tons of green or nature, close to my childhood friends, I definitely feel that emotional sting a bit and that longing for a simpler childhood.
It's so funny. I'm recording. I'm at a friend's house in the Hamptons right now, and she's a psychologist. So I was telling her about this episode to your German, word origin. She was telling me that the Buddhists think nostalgia is like a problem. It's actually a longing for something that no longer exists.
Yeah.
Which I thought was fascinating, right? To your summer on the trampoline, somebody bringing you a nice warm bowl of mac and cheese, right? Like, we miss that thing. So it's almost like psychologically, as we like lean into whether it's music or toys or games or, experiences or content, like, are we trying to recreate a moment? It's so interesting because I was with you guys, like I always thought of it as warm and fuzzy. Isn't it lovely? But maybe we're in our psyche, we're just longing for something we can't have again.
I love that. Yeah, it's like, let it go, Hannah. College is over. It's done. Let it go.
No. Yeah, you just got like 5 decades of work ahead. Enjoy.
Yeah, exactly. Get excited for that. Gosh, I love this conversation already. What's interesting about this is that I think about like the things I feel nostalgic for, right? Like, I love the 80s. I love the 90s. I think about high school. Like, I think about these sort of really like rich emotional moments. But then I think about the content that I'm consuming today that are actually from a life that I didn't live. For instance, like right now, if you were to do my Spotify rap today, or the number one song would probably be What a Fool Believes by the Doobie Brothers. Like, I love yacht rock. Yacht rock came out in the late 70s. I was born in 79, right? So I did not experience that at all. I'm from Detroit, so I wasn't even in Los Angeles when these guys were writing. So like Steely Dan, Michael McDonald, Kenny Loggins, Christopher Cross, like I didn't know these guys. The songs weren't on the radio when I was a kid, but yet I feel so connected to this music. So I ask of you all, we know what you're nostalgic for things that you've lived. Are there things that you're consuming that's not from your era? Like, are you doing throwbacks like Stranger Things is a good example. Like, we were watching Stranger Things, which was a new piece of content, but it was hearkening back to the 80s. Like, are there things that you're experiencing, Hannah and Aria, that feel like you didn't live it, but it kind of feels like yours too, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on that yacht rock wave as well. So Fleetwood Mac, The Smiths, America, Steely Dan, all of my favorites. And then I'm on my 3rd rewatch of Friends as well.
Oh, that's a biggie, yeah.
I absolutely long for this era that I never lived in. And I think it's, again, longing for a simpler past. It's very easy with nostalgia to think about the good things and not necessarily the struggle of that generation or of that era. And when we're experiencing so many hard things in our life now, politically or personally, moving, being post-grad, it's easy to look back and watch Friends and think, hey, their life looks great. Like, they just get to hang out at a coffee shop every single day. They have cute haircuts, great hairstyles, and they're just a group of friends, geeking. And that's just something that I really long for.
And a kick-ass apartment, even in the 80s. I was in New York in the late 80s, and I was not living in that apartment.
Exactly. Huge apartment, neighbors right next door. Exactly. And I was actually also, something current. I was doing some market research for this, and I sat down with a high school friend of mine, and I was like, hey, what's cool in high school right now? Like, what's nostalgic for you? And they are obsessed with 2016 because at that point, they were 8 or 9 years old, and that was the era of the YouTube influencers, the rainbow filters on Instagram, house music, the pink wall. We've got LA at its peak, right? Like those palm trees. And so she was saying, like, yeah, high schoolers definitely are longing for an era in which we never experienced. And part of that is because of the resurgence of house music now. And also this lack of core influencers or core superstars because social media is everywhere. They're like, we miss the YouTuber era. We miss these influencers that had millions of followers that everybody was talking about, and we never got to live through that or experience that. And so we're definitely seeing this longing transcend beyond Gen Z and kind of trickle down into Gen Alpha almost.
YouTubers are nostalgic. Now I am legit old.
That's a really good shout, though. I mean, I really gravitate to this idea of like a simpler time because in the 90s and late 90s, things weren't simple at all. Like there was so much happening. Like there was like geopolitical things happening. We were like bombing other countries. Like things were like really like there was a lot of discourse around gay relationships. Hip hop was like trying to push through. There was all these things that were happening that didn't seem simple at all. But yet you look back and go, man, those are some pretty good times. I liken it to like relationships. You go, man, I really loved her. She was so great to me. Oh, she was so good. But when y'all were together, you hated her. It's like you guys argued all the time. All we do is think about like sort of the warm and fuzzy stuff that we experience.
Well, our brains do that, right? I think there's some stat around like in psychology where we tend to like process and remember the good.
That's
and
right.
We completely gloss over probably the 8 reasons you broke up, right?
That's right. But to see a life that you didn't live and go, man, those are some good times. That's a really powerful thing. Like you look back at it and go, it's simpler than it is now. And I suppose that it's just a signal that the world is continuing to get increasingly more complex. So what was simple for a life you didn't live or that was complicated then feels far simpler than it is for you today. Hannah, what about you? What do you feel nostalgic for an existence that you didn't actually experience?
I honestly think you really hit the nail on the head because when I think of like YouTubers and stuff like that, I also am like in a longing, I guess you could say, for like, honestly, the time where you could have gotten involved in it. Because now, like, I remember last episode, we were talking about how content creators, like, that's like one of the most sought after careers because now it's in like this saturated market, super hard to get into. It's so lucrative. And like at the time, like that's like your simpler time of like, I totally could have gotten into it. I could have done these like awful hot pink edits on my videos, which is true because that is significantly like more simple than it is now. I think where I express my like desire to be a part of a generation where like I'm not is definitely like through my clothes and stuff. I think there's definitely cycles of things like that. Like I'm a huge baggy jean, low rise type of person. In high school, I definitely would have not worn that. Like that was not the generation that like I was trying to correlate myself to. I think like right now I'm at the point where like I'm trying to look older. I'm trying to connect with like different demographics. Like I don't really care anymore. So I don't know. That is super interesting. I'm so surprised that high schoolers feel that way. It like almost makes me sad. It's like long for an era that's even different from that. Like you should be going way further back. Why are you stopping in 2016? Keep going.
And Hannah, you just kind of slapped me in the face right now because I think about my wardrobe. I dress like 1960s Ivy prep. Like that's all. That's a world I didn't exist in. Like I didn't like experience that other than like Carlton Banks from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. But like that wasn't like my existence. But I see that stuff and I go, man, like I like that. Like that to me, like that feels timeless. So even when pants get baggy, I still wear them very close tapered chinos because those things don't go out of style.
Yeah.
Gayle, what about you? Are there things that you feel sort of like nostalgic for that you didn't experience?
I went through like all these nostalgia phases of like old movies. And there used to be this little video store back when we got movies in boxes and cassettes and, you know, VCRs. And There was this British woman, Mrs. Hudson's Video Library in New York when I first moved there. And she just did the most amazing curation. So like you'd go in one week and it was like Hitchcock week, right? And it was like, oh my God, this is so fascinating. Horror movies, but like they were so different, right? I grew up with like, Friday the 13th and Scream. And this was so different. It was like such simple, like I love the art of those movies and just creating fear with the simple cinematography and music. And there'd be Audrey Hepburn week, and you'd be like, oh my God, that's a life I would love to have lived. And there was just some glamour to that like era and that Breakfast at Tiffany's kind of like time that was so different as I was living the, baggy jeans and 80s, life in New York.
That raises a really good point, though. In the industry, marketers talk about borrowed nostalgia. Like, let's take from these things and we leverage that equity to bring something forward. So to your point, taking films from yesteryear and curating them says something about your taste, which I would argue is like the last bastion of humanity in an AI-driven world. Your ability to curate and say what belongs to something else is a value that can't be sort of duplicated, right? But then I think about like, does that create opportunities for brands? For instance, Gap is doing their whole campaign now, bringing back 1996.
Yeah.
They're taking a time, almost like a time capsule, and providing a point of view for today. We've seen brands do this, I think, interestingly. I say Gap is a good example of that.
Yeah.
But we've also seen this done like poorly. I think about Woodstock. Do you remember like Woodstock 2.0?
Yeah.
There's Woodstock that we know from the 60s. I think like in the early 2000s, they tried to recreate a Woodstock-like thing, and it was a tragedy. It was a catastrophe. It was terrible. So I guess the question that's coming through my mind is that are there examples of the things today that feel current but are hearkening back to things from the past? Either things that you've lived, experience that you live, or things that you had not lived, i.e. Gap bringing back the 90s aesthetic.
Yeah, the Adidas Samba couldn't be hotter,
Adidas
right?
Samba, exactly. Pizza Hut going back to like the picnic tablecloths and like the salad bar and all the red cups, all these things that are hearkening from a times past. Or even Burger King, their iconography is going back to the old school Burger King. Hannah, Aria, are you feeling this borrowed nostalgia? Is it resonating with you?
Definitely. I also think it's really cool that you like bring up the AI stuff, because I don't know if you guys are familiar with the term AI slop.
Oh, yeah.
We're very familiar.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, it's like so obvious when like this authenticity has just been like taken away from the brand. So I do feel a sense of appreciation, not a sense of a brand trying to be something they're not when they're just going back to their roots. Because I think like right now we've gotten so far on the spectrum of like that AI slop and things that are so inauthentic that going to something that's like really the core of the brand and re-highlighting that, like I appreciate it. I long for it because I'm like so desperate at this point to like not see that AI thing anymore.
Yeah.
So I think that's like super cool. And I also would have to say that I think brands are kind of doing it in a way that's supernatural to the current it's going against. Like no one's like going out there being like, we're not AI slop, like look at what we're doing. Like they're just doing it. Because also a key point here is that they have the history to back it up. And I think that's the really like key thing with nostalgia and like how we pick and choose like what works for us. Like for example, like I love listening to the Beatles, and like when I look at the Beatles like historically, I'm like, oh, their fan base does kind of resonate with like who I am. Like I am this generation's version of like more of like a hippie, like granola type girl, like whatever. And I'm like, oh, that's what people then listen to. So this makes sense for me to grab onto. And it's like that twofold issue of they're also authentic. Like I know like historically, like they use the resources available to them. It wasn't this AI stuff. So they're kind of like hitting those two check marks of like authenticity, having a good historical representation that like those things can go with the current and like feel natural for us not to like borrow the nostalgia, but instead like make it a part of our new own identity.
Yeah, as you mentioned the Beatles, not for nothing, I have a reminder set on my calendar for 10 a.m. tomorrow because Jodeci's tickets go on sale. Jodeci is celebrating the 35th year of their first album, Forever My Lady. And I will 1000% be there when they're here in Detroit.
100%.
And I think that like these idea of like repackaging old albums for a contemporary time and those guys go on tour for it, people show up. It creates such great opportunities for brands, in my view. And I'm very curious your take, Gayle, but I want to hear from you first, Aria. Like, I feel so much opportunity for brands to go, hey, we're not going to just borrow from the nostalgia. We're going to contribute to it. Aria, talk to us. Are there any borrowed nostalgia activations or expressions that you see in the marketplace now that you're like, oh yeah, I'm feeling that? Or are you seeing them and rolling your eyes?
I think in general, with a lot of the campaigns that I've seen with Gap, they're doing it really well for Gen Z. And, you know, with Cat's Eye and Milkshake as the song, like that was something that we grew up with all throughout middle school. Hannah, I don't know if you relate to this, but like singing that song in middle school in the hallways and kind of like joking with your friends about it.
You know what's sad about that, Aria? I'm sorry to cut you off, but what's sad about that is that when I saw the commercial and they were playing Milkshake, it didn't feel like an old song to me at all. It was like, this song just came out.
Yeah, it does. It still hits. Yeah.
This song is like 20-something years old. Like, I was like, that joint just came out, right? Good grief. Anywho,
oh my gosh.
Continue.
Well, I mean, I think that's a great point, Professor Collins, is that like nostalgia also taps into these moments that are always iconic.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe it's not necessarily bringing in something that's new or trying to start a new trend. It's almost just like pulling a hidden gem that's been buried through years and years and like putting the spotlight back on it. And so I think nostalgia really does work in marketing when the product that you're trying to promote is something that is iconic and is timeless. To me, low-rise jeans have always been iconic and timeless. Sambas have always been iconic and timeless. There are trend cycles that go back and forth, of course, but, you know, the resurgence of them, I think, is because of their history, because they are icons. And then we also talk about how people are really resistant to change. And so with nostalgia, we're tapping into something that's novel, right? Like Hannah and I have never experienced the era of Friends, of Beatles, but it's also familiar. Like something about it maybe reminds us of when our parents used to play it in the car when we were like 3-4 years old. And so that's really the golden spot that you want to be hitting as a marketer, right? That novelty that's familiar, no hardship, no friction, looking back in nostalgia as something that's a simpler time. Like that's really the golden spot. So that's what I think works really well with nostalgia in marketing. However, there is something that I think needs to be cautioned against.
Do tell.
And I don't think nostalgia always works. Because, again, with the market research of the high schooler I was talking to, she was like, yeah, Gap is not a cool brand in high school, like, at all. And that Cat's Eye ad kind of made it worse for them.
No.
And I was like, whoa, tell me more. Like, that's crazy. Because I feel like for us in college, Gap is the place to go for business casual, for those jeans. They've really made a resurgence for us. She was saying, like, our perception of Cat's Eye and that song is totally different because we didn't grow up singing that in middle school. We think Cat's Eye is maybe a little bit of like a childish girl group even. Like we don't really listen to their music. We don't think they're cool. And so when you're missing that timeline where the nostalgia doesn't hit for them, it can come off completely different. That's all we talk about in class, Professor Collins, is like culture is based on how we think about it, right? So like for them, it's totally different. And they're like, we think of Gap as a childish brand and we don't want to wear it because of that.
So interesting, right? Because it's the age difference. And I think that's where marketers, it's so hard to get that window right because, you know, at iHeart, Jingle Ball is a phenomenon for us, right? And so many brands partner with us. And it's really interesting because it's like, we think of it as a teen event, but in a lot of ways, the sweet spot is the preteen and the mom who are having this shared moment of pop music. And it's so interesting because we're always talking to brands about who they want to reach and how to use that show in the right way. And sometimes like you could hit a 14-year-old and you could hit a, you know, millennial mom of that 14-year-old and you might miss the teen right in the middle who, like you're saying, is seeing it as, oh, that's a kid's thing or that's a mom thing. It's very hard to find something that's multi-generational and threads all the way through. And that's where you got to really think hard about which is the target. Like Gap's doing great, right? And they're winning, your generation, and they're growing, so probably okay.
This is why marketing is hard AF. I mean, this right here. I mean, it's a very challenging thing. Shout out to all you CMOs. We get you. We see you. We see
Total
you.
empathy.
We feel you. Total empathy. Totally. Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like wanting to listen to brilliant young marketing students drop insights on everything from music to gaming, but instead, you get a bunch of Gen X industry long haulers reading from their lengthy thought piece that they posted on their favorite B2B social channels this morning. This format is different from any other marketing podcast because we get to hear from the market about how things actually are. And together, you get our context with their perspective. You wouldn't settle for just any old marketing insights, so don't settle for any insurance. Get the real deal. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. So you know what this got me thinking? And like, Gayle, you started pushing this thing here that like, there are very few things that are ubiquitous across everything, right? Like, there are very few artists that are ubiquitous. Like, but the only thing I would say that has that level of gravitas is really technology. But even still, when it comes to technology, there are swaths of the population that are hearkening back to a simpler time. They're like, man, social networking platforms, they have all this, these challenges to them. I just want them something simple. And we see within Gen Z, people using dumb phones, the flip phones. So I guess my question for you, Aria and Hannah, is technology acting in line with our general nostalgia for the media that we consume, the things that we wear, the things that we eat, what we expect of adornment and aesthetics?
100%. I think that everything's leaning on the side of simplicity. And like, it kind of goes back to the beginning of our conversation of like, maybe that's like the root cause of nostalgia. Like, even now, me looking at college, like, I'm not really like longing for failing a test again. I'm like, I want the simplicity of what college was.
Like you ever failed a test, Hannah. Come on.
You didn't see me in math. You saw me in marketing.
Touche. And I think, Hannah, you actually raised a good point. Said there's a want for simplicity, but that doesn't always mean convenience. And I think that when we think about technology, we try to optimize for convenience because we feel like that's where the value is. But in some cases, the trade-off for convenience is so great that you go, I just want it to be simpler, right?
People forget that that's actually like a core idea of AI even. Like AI at its core, like even though it's producing things that, we may not agree with, especially from like a marketing perspective of like the AI slop and whatnot. Like
we embrace some AI. We embrace the AI. I'm with you, yeah.
It's doing some really cool things that's like really benefiting humanity. And also like at this point, there's so much like AI integrated in even my iPhone that I'm not sure if I could revert and go back without it. I want those features, but I don't want to have like a robot like in front of me. And I think that's why people are going back. Like even with these flip phones, like if you look at the difference between the flip phones now that they're reproducing versus the ones back then, like the flip phones have better keyboards now and like they have that stuff. Like,
you don't want to go back to triple tap text.
Right.
That's not coming back.
I mean, it's in the past, but we have the tech for a reason.
That was both inconvenient and not simple.
Exactly. Exactly.
But Aria, what say you on the technology side?
Well, as a photographer and an artist, I love going back to analog and things that are simpler. So I actually have cyanotypes behind me even, which is a very physical process of like going out in the sun and doing things with your hands. And I think with the rise of AI, we're seeing a lot of artists push against that by leaning into physical processes like film that can only be done analog in a dark room, processed by hand with these chemicals, with the knowledge. And then, once photographers get on that train, that's how subculture becomes pop culture, right? Of like media is now consuming this, people are consuming this, they want to hop on the trends. And so film cameras, digital cameras, VHS, it's all coming back, camcorders even. But it's very interesting because some of it comes off a little performative to me even, where it's like, I don't think a lot of these people, their intention is to get off the internet and completely disconnect. It almost seems like they want to signal that they understand that this is some sort of taste, some sort of niche style, but then also go right back on Instagram and post those digital photos, post that film, post that they have a film camera. So it is an interesting kind of paradox that you have here of like, people seem like they want to disconnect, but also they're posting about disconnecting on social media and are constantly on it.
That's so true. To add on to that, like especially seeing it in a college setting, like when I determine if like someone I'm seeing is like performative or not, it's like, does it match their whole being? Like you really have to put like your whole foot
Do I look
forward,
sexy
like,
with this old school camera?
Literally. Yeah. It's like, are you wearing the stuff to match that? Like, oh, you do that? Are you listening to the music of that generation? Like you kind of have to clock like everything. And I think that Gen Z is definitely like trying to do that. Like they are trying to make their whole being whatever aesthetic they choose. And if that's AI and like new tech, like you can tell the people who are like totally embracing it, like they have super clean backpacks, like all of this, like whatever, like they're posting it. I think Aria totally hit that.
So, we were talking a lot about like the consumption of media, what we wear, the products that we use, the technology that we use. What it kind of makes me wonder now is experiences. For instance, in the 80s, 90s, there was a really big like club scene. This is all about going to the club, popping bottles. Like that was just the thing that you did. But what we're seeing more and more now is a different nightlife experience. People are going to like speakeasies or they're going to listening lounges. It's a different sort of feel. Like, do you all think back to like, yeah, I want to pop some Cristal and put the sprinklers up and do the whole thing, like, or sparklers up? Is that the thing that's kind of going through your minds at all? Or do you feel like, nah, that existence is not the one that we look to for sort of emotional want, FOMO, if you will, and we just choose to have a different experience altogether? So I guess our experiences what drive nostalgia, or is it our ability to extract experiences that gives us nostalgic feelings?
I think it's the latter, and I would add on to it that it's super values-based. I think that something that we've been talking about a lot is that like Gen Z really values like longevity. In another episode, we talked about how like there's kind of things that are out of reach for Gen Z from a monetary perspective. So a lot of the times we're reinvesting like in ourselves and whatnot. And so for like the clubbing example, it kind of rejects a core Gen Z value right now of like going to bed early so that you could join the run club in the morning. Like those are super popular, stuff like that. So I will say that there is like a population where like when I would turn 21, like I wanted to do all those things because that's what the generations before me did. And I was like, that's super cool. But then once I got like those few months out of my system and like kind of got intrinsic to my own values, I would say that nostalgia has to match our value system.
That's a powerful take.
It's so interesting that the nostalgia, I was just looking at some of Pranav from Neuro Insights, right? He's super smart, does all this neuro study stuff. Yeah. And he's always saying like 90% of marketing, 90% of what we remember is total subconscious. And I think nostalgia, Hannah, what you're getting at is so interesting because I think nostalgia takes subconscious connections and makes them conscious. Right? You hear that song, you see those jeans from junior high, and you have a place to connect the two. And I think there's something about nostalgia that takes an emotion, a subconscious feeling, and connects it to a memory.
You're absolutely spot on. Like those experiences get tattooed to our amygdala and hippocampus, right? And those systems in the brain are not only associated with memory, but also feeling. And because of what we feel, we end up acting accordingly, right? Those things are all associated with the limbic system. Our emotions are catalyzed by our memories, which ultimately drive decisions that we make. And we can't communicate it. It doesn't feel rational or logical because that resides in another part of the brain, what we know is the neural cortex, right? And like these things are operating in concert, sort of trying to decide who leads what.
I guess, does it work with nostalgia? Hannah, you were saying like Beatles, right? Like you discovered the Beatles. Now, if somebody puts Beatles into their marketing, is that going to now trigger, you have this new memory, even though you didn't live it way back when, but does it trigger some emotion that makes you pay attention more?
Yeah. That's super true. And again, I would like re-harp on the idea of the authenticity of like what the brand is promoting. So like going back to like old logos and stuff like that, like I think that's a signal of saying like, we're still us, this is what we do. And so like, I think being able to project your values with that type of stuff and like being able to correlate the two authentic like ways of like, for example, if I heard a commercial with the Beatles playing, I'd be like, oh, that represents me because here are the values of using like old music and not having like AI incorporated into it, whatever. Because at the end of the day, like there's also some nostalgic brands that I wouldn't go back onto, like in the brief with like Pizza Hut and stuff like that. Like those values don't align with me anymore. They could do a rebrand. Like I totally grew up with it, but like I am going to be a pizza snob. Like it's just those things of like, is it really going to carry on with me?
So, Aria, put a bow on this for us. When we talk about like going out, are you hearkening for a time of yesteryear that maybe you didn't experience? Or do you feel more at home with the like curated experiences that like feel more of today and less of yesterday?
I would say with experiences, it does feel a bit harder to tie that to nostalgia, especially with experiences that I've never personally had. And so when you're talking about, going clubbing or popping bottles, like bottle service is just out of my field of imagination even. Like I've never experienced that. I think it's way out of my budget, probably.
It's insane. It was out of everyone's budget. It was an absurd error. Like,
Totally.
why?
If you go back to music videos, you'd want some of that. It was crazy.
Maybe I need to go back to the YouTube era, go back to the music videos, totally. But I think with experiences, it does feel a little bit harder to connect or to really aspire to do something like that and like really push myself to take action on it. Like I think with nostalgia, it really is a lot in our heads. And Gayle, as you were saying, it's very emotionally driven. And so it's almost this feeling and maybe not always this want for action. And so I think that's why it might work better when we're talking about a product or a song and not something that's purely a service or an experience. Because, when we buy that product, we then have that physical association tied to the memory, as opposed to an experience where I feel like I have to go through more barriers to go through that and like, really stand in line to go clubbing, like you said, Professor Collins. And that's just not as appealing to me.
It goes back to like our conversation in the last episode about lines and stuff, right?
Yeah,
it's like
that's right.
It's like waiting in line is earning it, right? I think, Hannah, to your point of it's not just can I drop a hundo at a club and have bottle service. It's have I picked the right bar and have I looked at this hand-drawn menu and this somebody put this concoction together that's new but based in something from the 20s. Part of the nostalgia, I think, that threads through is these things that are artisanal, the valuing the making of, right? Touching the vinyl, taking the picture with film, all of those things. There's something about the physicality, too, of these things.
Totally. I think that campaign that Polaroid is doing right now, we're doing for the last year, I think is just absolutely brilliant. It's like, get some sand between your toes. Sort of these tactile things that can't be captured in zeros and ones, but can only really be experienced live and then captured in a very analog sort of way through Polaroid. And like my kids use Polaroid cameras and they feel like the photos matter a little bit more when there's more scarcity.
Yeah.
And therefore they're more judicious about the photos that they take. And therefore they have more meaning. We're nearing to the end here. And I guess instead of doing like our normal speed round, I guess we have one real question. When it comes to brands engaging in nostalgia, do you care or don't you? And if you do, what needs to happen? What needs to be satisfied to make it work? And if you don't, is there any opportunity there that marketers have yet to really unpack? The first question, I'll start with you, Hannah. Care or don't care? Should brands be leveraging nostalgia? Care or don't care?
I definitely care. And I think that it just hits a lot of boxes for me. It's not necessarily that they can't engage in like UX principles that are more modern and stuff like that. I care because I think nostalgia, like I said, represents the history. I know, like I can look back and be like, if it's not broken, I don't need to fix it. So I feel confident in this brand. It's never been broken.
Yeah.
And I think overall, yeah, it like points itself as a place in history that I can feed into.
So you care, and it works when those things feel aligned and authentic, right?
Totally. Because I don't think you can rebrand yourself like trying to hit, like, let's say you're a brand and you had X population for however long, and now it's been 40 years later and you're trying to get them again. There's still some stuff that you're going to have to hit with the status. Like I mentioned, like our technology and stuff is too advanced. Like you can't bring us back to be doing more work, but you can hit on the same values that you represented at that time that brought people in the first place.
That's a really good shout. Now, I wonder if like enshittification plays a role in this too, that when you go back to the way things were, we're like, man, this is much better then than the things work now. Or if like the product was ever really that good. You know, I feel like there is some danger there that like you go back with like all this like great feeling about it. And then when you experience it again, you go, ugh, that sucked. Like my memories were better than the experience. So Hannah, if you're saying that you do care, there's opportunity there, that's another thing to think about is that you can screw up the nostalgia because the expectations are so high.
The main point is that you have to match the era that you're in, like respectfully. I've gone back to like, even like old apps. Like I love Temple Run. I don't know if you guys remember that. And I had like an ad for it or something like that. And I like re-downloaded it. And I could definitely tell that it was back then. And like, I appreciate now the technological advances. So for brands of any kind to rematch me in the era, it has to hit the simplicity markers. And simplicity now looks different. It tasted good then. If they wanted to hit you again, like they needed to be using like new ingredients and stuff like that to match you in the era that you're in without compromising what it's trying to represent at its core.
That's a really, really good shout. Aria, take us home. Care, don't care. Nostalgia. Do you care that brands are leveraging it or don't you care?
Absolutely, I care. I think it's very, very powerful. I mean, we're seeing Gen Z really resonate with it emotionally. And I think exactly what all of you are saying, right? Nostalgia is very powerful, but if you have a bad product, it's not going to be able to save it. So, you know, meeting at that level, really making sure you are meeting those expectations because constantly we are looking back at our childhood or at our memories with rose-colored glasses. So how can you kind of match that in the era now and make sure that you are meeting consumers with that expectation? And from there, you don't want to get stuck in the past either. I think a campaign is really, really good to bring that attention back. Like I said before, you know, rediscover that hidden gem, uncover it from the dirt and shine a spotlight on it. But then moving forward, like, let's talk about how we can continue to innovate, continue to take a stance, continue to build on our values, and continue this campaign to really reach new generations. I think nostalgia is a great way to capture the attention of one generation. For example, let's go back to Gap, like capture college students. And then after that, hopefully moving forward with other campaigns, you can have that trickle down effect into high schoolers with campaigns that feel a little bit more modern, feel more cool, feel more aspirational, not really holding back on that era of emotions that they're not really resonating with. Then the final thing that I want to say with nostalgia is that there's definitely ways that you can do it right, and there's lots of ways you can do it wrong. And so I just want to be really clear. And when I'm seeing these nostalgic campaigns, I'm really hoping that these brands are tapping into a very niche and personal human experience for me. And back to the Pizza Hut, like them transforming their restaurants doesn't do a lot for me because as a child, I wasn't going in and doing a sit down eat in. I was still buying delivery and eating out. So I think for a fun campaign that feels nostalgic to me, like one of my favorite memories is ordering Pizza Hut for the Super Bowl. So the highlight for me was the Pizza Hut that got delivered that I got to eat with my family in the living room. And so if you can really tap into those deep grooves and those deep memories and really make a consumer feel like, wow, this is something that I experienced, I almost forgot about, but thinking back to it, like I feel very emotionally tied to it. I think that's the best way that you can do nostalgia. And maybe brands are missing the mark there. So I would just encourage like a really deep dive into human experiences.
I love this. It's like nostalgia is so powerful, but it comes with a cost.
Yeah, and I think you guys both said it. There's got to be an authenticity to it. Anybody could just pay music rights and drop a song into their ad and try to claim nostalgia. But like, I think Gap's hitting now, and they're doing a really good job of, they're not just doing nostalgia, right? They're going into nostalgia and old music, but they have a right to play in the 90s. They own the 90s, right? So totally. Now that that's on brand, it makes sense, but maybe it wouldn't make sense if a competitor to Gap were to come in and say, we're going deep into the 90s and we're going to appropriate all of that look and feel and music, and it might not work. I don't know. It feels like you have to have a right to jump into that nostalgia, which is you have to have that love for it.
Totally. This requires a level of intimacy to understand the context back then and what it means today. Well said. Hannah, Aria, as always, you all never cease to impress. Thank you so very much for being with us on Market Says, hipping us to game so that we might understand what's going on in the market, and that the marketers who are listening to this podcast and watching us on YouTube, that they too can walk away a little bit smarter, as Gayle and I always do every week. So thank you all so very much. And to our audience, thanks for joining us for another episode of Market Says. Gayle, want to say anything else to the people?
Hannah, Aria, thank you. You guys make us smarter every time we show up for this show. You threw a lot of warnings out there for brands, right? I'm sure there's people sitting there thinking about their fall campaigns, their holiday campaigns right now, and nostalgia is on the table. So marketers out there, if you're going to go there, make sure you go there with truth and authenticity. And if you're going to nostalgia or old nostalgia, do it with respect and love and a real reason why.
Amen. The market has spoken. I hope that you're listening. See you next time. Peace.
Market Says is a Bubbler Media iHeart podcast production. If you're not in the conversation, you're not in the game.